Week 10 of the NFL season is upon us, and here we are on DraftKings TV for the preview show. We have Geoff Ulrich, Adam Levitan, and Andrew Wiggins with us. I'm your host, Dan Strafford. David Kitchen with the week off, still waiting baby number 2, so we will bring you up to date on that when that information is available. But first, there is a NFL week to get to, and we'll bring you the top plays right here and now. Tonight's game, guys, Buffalo and the Jets. Plenty of narratives involved with Rex Ryan coming back, who he's choosing to be a captain for his team and all that jazz. But is there any plays, Andrew, in this game that you'd be willing to jump on from a Thursday through Monday perspective?
I like the Buffalo offense just overall now that Tyrod's back in the fold, but there's some concerns about how much they're even going to be throwing the ball. I think he threw it less than 15 times last week, and pretty much all of them went to Sammy Watkins. Sammy's going to get the Revis treatment this week. So while I like that offense, going up at New Jersey, a good defense on the road, I don't think I'll be touching anyone from that side. I think on the Jets side, the receivers have been playing well, but they're also getting a pretty good defense in Buffalo. Buffalo has given up a lot of yards through the air, but I think there are better spots this week, so I probably won't be looking at Decker or Marshall, even though I've been playing them an okay amount in the previous week. So this whole game's kind of a pass for me.
Geoff, any value in Carlos Williams if LaShawn McCoy doesn't go?
I think at 3,800, I think there's a little bit of value. He's so cheap that just from a volume perspective, he'll probably hit at least 10 points, in my opinion. The Jets are still a really good run D, so it's not someone I'd go crazy with. And it's kind of like Andrew said, I'm not super high on this game anyways. So I think that with Revis covering Watkins, you could maybe even look at Charles Clay as like a secondary receiver because the Bills really don't have anyone else. I think they threw 12 times last week. 8 of them went to Watkins. Maybe that gets tilted to Clay this week with Revis covering him, but these are all sort of a little bit shots in the dark. I don't see this game as super high scoring.
Yeah, I feel like this may be a 12-9 sort of contest that is ugly throughout. So not the best for daily fantasy perspectives. Adam, let's move on. Let's not subject you to this game. We'll move on to the Denver Green Bay game here. And I guess it all starts with who's starting at running back. The question of Lacy v. Starks and the news coming out that Starks is the one, but Lacy is still going to be involved. How do you make sense of that situation?
Yeah, so Green Bay, Detroit, I think. Eddie Lacy has been fat, out of shape, eating the entire year, and he's been outplayed by James Starks for the entire year. I mean, it's not fair to the guys in the locker room to keep putting Eddie Lacy out there when James Starks is outplaying him. That said, I don't think that Eddie Lacy is just going to, recede into the night. They still said they want to use a 1-2 punch. I have it at 12 to 15 carries for Starks and 8 to 10 for Lacy in this game. And I do think the Packers will be winning this game. So I do think that there will be 25 running back carries to go around. If Starks was 3K, it'd be a no-brainer. But at 4,900, only projected for 12 to 15 carries, maybe 2 to 3 catches, I think we have to pause a little bit, but there's definitely still merit to Starks, I think.
Geoff, how about a Aaron Rodgers, Randall Cobb stack in this game? Do you think they are back on the same page after recent weeks of trouble connecting?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they could definitely ride the momentum from the end of last week's game into this one. I think the biggest factor is that they're playing the Lions, who are just, awful right now. So I think being at home at Lambeau is going to be a big factor. I definitely like targeting the Packers offense in this game. I think that maybe not only Randall Cobb, but I'd actually look at Devontae Adams this week. He's only 4,200, 11 targets last week, performed exceptionally well against a pretty tough Carolina secondary in week 9. So I'm really looking at Adams as one of my best value picks this week. I think a wide receiver. I think people might be slow to get back on him after the slow start. I do like Cobb too. I think you can maybe even think of a stack with both of them for tournaments. But I really like Adams as a value play. Yeah, and I am expecting Green Bay to get back on track in this game.
Andrew, how about the tight end position here? Is there value in Ebron or Rodgers in this contest at 33 and 3,000 respectively?
Ebron, I think he's a little too cheap, but I'm concerned about the entire Lions offense. I just think the Packers D at home in particular has been quite good. And actually the Packers D, I think, is in play here at 3,200. If you really want to take a flyer on Ebron in tournaments, I think that's fine. Cash games, probably not. Richard Rodgers, I think with Devontae back in the fold, that's going to take some targets from him. I mean, he's cheap, but I'm probably looking another direction at tight end. I really like Devontae Adams a lot. He might be my favorite play of the week. And I think you could play Aaron Rodgers at quarterback too. He's got 1,100 discount over Brady. The team total's at 29.5. Seems like a really prime spot for Green Bay offense to get back on track, back to that offense that we know can be so explosive, especially at home. They've always been better at home, and this is just a great spot for them.
Andrew, sticking with you here and moving on to Dallas and Tampa Bay. We talked about Matt Castle before we started recording, turnover prone, and but you had a big week last week from some unexpected outcome. Cole Beasley putting up gigantic numbers and being a real key to some tournament teams out there in the Millionaire Maker and other tournaments alike at very low owned percentages. Do you see any value in this Dallas offense going up against a Tampa defense that we've targeted before?
Yeah, I do, but I think it's more in the running game, and it's just because there's not that many running backs in the NFL where you know that they're going to be getting all the touches for all the downs. And Darren McFadden is one of them right now. So I think you can pencil him in for 25 plus touches. He's priced at 4,900. So he's not priced like a guy that's getting all those touches. And frankly, he's looked pretty good. He's had 2 tough matchups the previous 2 weeks. He gets a better one this week. I just like everything I'm getting with him. And really the most important thing is that you know what you're getting. So McFadden's a guy that I'm locking in. I think I'm going to stay away from the rest of the offense. I think they're going to look to get Dez going a little bit, so maybe you could look to him in tournaments, but just not a cash game play for me.
Adam, how about Mike Evans in this contest? We know he's a target monster. We know that there's not many other options for this Tampa Bay offense right now, outside of maybe Martin and Sims doing some work in the backfield. What do you make of Evans in a matchup with the Cowboys?
Yeah, Mike Evans played about as bad of a game a wide receiver can possibly play last week and still had 8 catches for 154 yards. I think Dallas's secondary is somewhat underrated. It's not really a unit that I prefer to attack. That said, Mike Evans is probably going to get another 12 to 15 targets. I'm real hesitant to project guys above 12, so I think that's really going overboard, but 12 to 15, I think is fair. And obviously he's a super talented guy. He just seems like so raw to me. So I don't know. I kind of prefer Cobb at 6,700 over Evans at 6,800, but there's definitely a lot of Mike Evans truthers out there. So I'm sure they'll be on him.
Are they any relation to Steve Smith's truthers, or are they different breed?
Oh, I think they're very different. Like the Steve Smith truthers are the guys that are like in wheelchairs and stuff. the Mike Evans truthers are guys like studying like Spark scores and stuff like that.
Now, Geoff, in this contest, any other names that you think are worthy of keeping an eye on or worth moving on to our next contest?
I'm kind of considering the Dallas D as a sneaky, maybe like a tournament play. Tampa's actually, like their last 3 games, they've gone against the 3 worst teams in terms of getting sacks. So there's been like no pressure on Jameis Winston the last couple of weeks. I think that might change this week with Dallas. So I like Dallas as a defense play at 2,500. I don't know if I trust them enough to use them in cash game or anything like that, but I think that's a play. Outside of that, I think we touched on everything. Everything else seems a little bit too risky for me outside of what we mentioned.
I feel like there's inherent risk with almost every defense this week. So it'll be interesting to see who you guys come down to as we go through this process. I haven't had a good feeling about a single defense that I've penciled in yet as I build lineups. Adam, on the Carolina-Tennessee game, we saw Marcus Mariota go out, and he was in every single lineup we talked about from the Millionaire Maker and from the qualifiers last week at 1.6 or 2.7% owned. Do you think we're going to see a bump in ownership percentage because of that big game against New Orleans? And is that a trap? Is it a trap going into Carolina with someone like Mariota at this point?
Yeah, so I would be real wary of going back to Mariota in this spot, although I do think that it's kind of a letdown spot for Carolina. 2 weeks ago, they win on Monday night, and then short week, then they get up for the Green Bay game, the matchup of the NFC Titans, and then they win that game, and now they have to go on the road to kind of sleepy Tennessee. Would not surprise me at all if they show up flat in this game. That said, the Marcus Mariota play last week was specific to New Orleans' dumpster fire of a defense. I think that Carolina poses a far different challenge for him this week.
So if we are staying away from Mariota, is Cam Newton in play, Andrew, or is this a game that you may stay away from because of the sort of narratives that Adam was laying out there?
Yeah, it's not even that. I think Carolina will be fine, but it's just kind of where Cam's priced at 7K. There's some guys at a little bit cheaper price point like Andy Dalton at 65, or you could look up for Rodgers at 7.5. So he's just kind of sandwiching between some plays that I prefer. He's on the road. The team total is okay, just under 25, but I think it's just a spot I'm going to avoid pretty much this whole game.
Geoff, is there value in Antonio Andrews? Or, I mean, he's the lead back, but still not getting a ton of carries. Is there any reason to keep an eye on him?
No, he's a converted fullback who ran like a 4.8. He's going against a tough defense. I don't have any interest in rostering him this week. I think he missed out on some longer big plays last week because of his lack of speed and against a better defense. I think he'll just get shut down. I see this as an ugly game too. Maybe you could think about Delaney Walker. He's the leading receiver for the Titans. But outside of that, maybe Dorial Green-Beckham, 3,200. But again, you're going up against a bad matchup. So I'm not really too interested in this game either. I see it as kind of an ugly contest too.
I'm just hoping that Tennessee runs that double deflection pass play again for Walker. That worked out really well.
That was pretty sweet.
Dial that up again, draw it on the whiteboard, and make it happen. Geoff, sticking with you here and moving on, St. Louis and Chicago. The Bears coming off of the Monday night game. We all watched Alshon, Langford. There was a lot of positives for once out of the Bears offense in that second half. Now they go on the sort of opposite end of a road trip to St. Louis, where St. Louis's defense is probably a little bit underrated from a conventional standpoint. They've done a great job this year. Do you see a step back for this offense, or do you think with Jay Cutler under center, they can keep this train going and keep feeding Langford and Alshon to make them cash plays this week?
No, I don't even think it's a matter of how the Bears are going to play this week. It's just a matter of who they're going up against. The Rams at home, 0 passing touchdowns in their last 2 home games. They're kind of a different team at home. Their defense is very underrated, like you said, but their pass defense has been really shut down. Alshon Jeffrey, 15 targets a game, but he's really risky this week. I'm not crossing him off altogether because there's not many wide receivers who are getting that many targets, and there's not many wide receivers with his physical abilities. He could still go up and get a couple jump balls in the end zone and get 2 touchdowns in this game, and I wouldn't be shocked. But as a cash game play, no, I don't think he should target the Rams ever really this year, especially at home. As far as Langford goes, I don't think he has the talent to overcome this matchup. He had a really nice game Monday night, but that was against the Chargers, who are, the worst run defense in the league. So Matt Forte might even be back, because I read something yesterday. So that's another thing to take into consideration. But regardless, I'm not targeting Chicago running backs this week at all. I don't like the matchup at all.
Adam, last week you guys talked about Todd Gurley and his matchup with Minnesota. Now he has a matchup with Chicago. Do you continue to ride Gurley as a top option at running back?
Yeah, I think Gurley will be the most popular running back play this week on DraftKings. I mean, Devontae Freeman is on a bye, and even though Gurley did not play well last week, did get into the end zone, did touch the ball over 22 times for the 5th straight game, and now he gets to be home against the Bears. I am perfectly fine going back to the Gurley Rams correlation play. I think it's a really bad spot for the Bears. Obviously a short week, back-to-back road game, and going to it really, like Geoff mentioned, a really, really strong Rams defense. And some people think that the Rams defense is only the front 4 that's really good. The guys in the back end have really stepped up this year and played really well in the secondary also. So I think Alshon's going to be real popular, and he's a pretty good fade. Gurley will be real popular, but I'm on board with that.
Andrew, how disappointed are you that Wes Welker is not available in the player pool?
Yeah, that's okay.
We can keep moving forward here to New Orleans and Washington. And Geoff, is Kirk Cousins in play because of how terrible this New Orleans defense is, or is Kirk Cousins just terrible enough to ignore how bad the New Orleans defense is?
Yeah, no, I was starting to make some rosters this week, and the first thing that came to my mind is, am I going to actually have to play Kirk Cousins in like a cash game because the matchup is so good. I don't know. I mean, I think he's definitely in play. I think for tournament stacks and stuff like that. And I think the reason he's in play is that Jordan Reed is in such a good spot in this game. He's only 4,600. The Saints, I should say, have given up, somewhere in the realm of like 6 catches, 80 yards per game to the tight end position this year. Jordan Reed playing great, plays more as a wide receiver almost. I think that you can definitely use Cousins in this game. I still would be semi-careful. Washington they can play a little bit ugly too. So I don't know. I think there might be better, more reliable options at cheap QB than Kirk Cousins for cash games, but he's definitely someone you can consider. And like a Jordan Reed, Kirk Cousins stack is perfectly fine for tournaments. I think it's got a lot of upside. As far as other Redskins options, you could look at Deshaun Jackson, but he didn't really look that great last week. He almost looked like he's still semi-injured. So I think for me, Cousins, Reed, that's pretty much it from a Washington perspective.
Andrew, last week I owned Mark Ingram, and it was a situation where a couple of inches here and there, and he scores a touchdown, a couple of inches here and there, and he breaks a big run and exceeds value. In the end, he wasn't that terrible, but seemed like he could have given us more. Do you go back to the Ingram well this week?
Yeah, I think that's a spot where you look more at the process and the results, and the touches were there like we anticipated. I think he touched the ball 26 times, and he was just unfortunate he didn't get in on the 1 yard line, and Breeze ended up having a 1 yard run, and he also threw a 1 yard pass to one of the tight ends. So it could have been a monster game, and it wasn't. But the touches are there. He's going to get the carries in the red zone. Really like Mark Ingram just going forward because he's not going to be losing any of those goal line rushes to Robinson. And I think they're just going to feed him. Spiller hasn't been effective. So it's just more touches going to him. He's kind of almost in that mold that I was talking about with McFadden, where you just know what you're going to get, and that's worth a lot. So, yeah, I think it's very viable to go back to Ingram this week.
Adam, any wide receivers in play here outside of the possibility of Deshaun Jackson? I know I've rostered Willie Snead plenty of times. His price tag has come up in the past few weeks, still getting some targets here and there. You have Jamison Crowder on the Washington side, who's very cheap at 3,500. Anybody that's worth monitoring at least?
Yeah, so everybody thinks this game is going to be a shootout. I'm not so sure it will be. I think both of these teams are capable of running the football on each other. So that kind of scares me from a perspective of like going all in on Cousins. I think Bortles is probably a stronger play than Cousins if you are going down to that range at quarterback. I never have a problem rostering Willie Snead. I mean, this guy plays 80% of the snaps with Drew Brees, and I think he's far more talented than people give him credit for. Maybe that's my preseason bias showing through because Snead was so good in the preseason, but I definitely think he's legit. And Brandon Cooks, I think, has looked way, way, way better of late. And I'm not sure what the status is of D'Angelo Hall and Breland and Culver and those guys in the Washington secondary, but they're definitely burnable whether those guys are healthy or not. So yeah, I want exposure to this game at 50.5. I'm just not sure exactly where I'm going to get it. Certainly Jordan Reed, but I'm not sure where else.
Andrew, we turn our attention to Miami and Philadelphia, and we saw perhaps a glimpse of a Philadelphia offense last week that we were expecting to start this year. Is Sam Bradford settling in, or was last week the anomaly and Bradford continues to be too erratic to really trust on a week-over-week basis?
Probably somewhere in the middle. He's definitely settling in compared to where he was earlier in the year, but he's still a bit erratic. And Jordan Matthews is finally not dropping every ball thrown his way, so that's good. But unfortunately for us as DraftKings players, his price never really dropped as much as it should have. He's at 6'2". He's just too expensive. I mean, you can go up to Randall Cobb for $500 more, Mike Evans. So it really just takes Matthews out of the cash game consideration. Maybe for tournaments, he's not going to be owned at all. I probably won't be looking that way. One of the guys who Mike Clay over at PFF keeps talking about is Zach Ertz, saying that he's getting all the looks in the red zone. So theoretically, he should have more touchdowns than he has. That's the kind of stuff we like to look at for tournaments. So he's $3K. I think he'd be a really nice tournament play. But generally, and Lamar Miller is a guy who's getting a lot of touches, but the Philly run defense is very, very good. So like there aren't a lot of plays I like in this game, and generally I think it's one to stay away from.
Geoff, how about the running backs in this one with DeMarco Murray and Lamar Miller, and even if you start to think of Sproles or Matthews as tournament options, but the two top ones here, Murray and Miller, see any viability in either of those plays?
I don't really like Lamar Miller this week at all. Like Andrew said, Philly run defense is really underrated. And the other thing is the Dolphins started to use their rookie Jay Ajayi. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I think I am. But they started to use him last week, and he looked pretty good. So now he might start losing carries. I like the fact he's been like the focal point of the offense since the coaching change, but I don't like this matchup at all. And really, last week he scored 3 short rushing touchdowns the past 2 weeks. And if you take even one of those away, his point total goes down quite a bit, and his yards per carry hasn't been great in the last 2 weeks either. So it's not like he's getting off huge chunks here and going to be a good volume play. So I'm completely off Miller this week personally. I do like the Philly running backs. I think I almost like Ryan Matthews as a play this week at 3,500. I could see Philly getting up big in this game and then just maybe giving Matthews a little bit more work. He's been averaging almost 10 yards per carry the last 2 or 3 games. So that's pretty crazy. And then DeMarco Murray, I think, is in a good spot too. He's finally playing over 50% of the snaps, involved in a lot of the pass game. I could see him going off too. So I do like targeting the Philly running backs this week. I think it's a good spot for Philly in general.
Any use in Miami wide receivers in this one, Adam? Jarvis Landry seems to be the highest priced one at 6,700, going up against this Philadelphia team that is pretty big on takeaways, but Landry has seemed to be getting more targets, more receptions as the season has gone along.
Yeah, first, I definitely do not think Sam Bradford has turned the corner whatsoever. Like this dude, I don't know, man. Like it still looks like a deer in the headlights to me. So I think this game is going to be pretty close. And I agree that the Eagles defense is certainly not one to attack. And the toughest matchup for the wide receivers in the slot, where Malcolm Jenkins has been coming down from the safety spot and defending slot receivers really, really well. And that doesn't mean that I don't want to roster Jarvis Landry, because he probably will catch like 7 passes for 40 yards. And on DraftKings, that's pretty valuable. I just don't see a ceiling with Jarvis Landry this week. The easier matchups are on the outside with Stills and Rashard Matthews going up against Byron Maxwell and Nolan Carroll. It's just, I'm not sure exactly where the targets are going to go. It could be Cameron. It could be Miller in the pass game. It could be Landry. It could be Stills. It could be Matthews. So for those reasons, I really haven't been on the Miami pass game very much this year.
Malcolm Jenkins is in the concussion protocol, but Kelly was quoted as saying he should be back tomorrow. We're not concerned about that. Assume about him missing time, not about the concussion protocol, but the way that reads comes off a little bit cold from Kelly there. But nonetheless, we can move on to Cleveland, Pittsburgh. And Andrew, this is the sort of game that if Ben Roethlisberger is healthy and ready to go, feels like a slam dunk. But now we have the foot injury. Are we off of Pittsburgh offense other than possibly D'Angelo Williams because of that injury?
Yeah, it's frustrating. Like last year, there were a few guys that you knew what you were going to get week in and week out. DeMarco Murray, Antonio Brown was one of them. It felt like, and this year there's just been so much more in flux, but it felt like with Ben coming back, we had 2 guys and Le'Veon too, before he got hurt. It's like we were finally going to have some stuff that we felt good about, and you could march out Antonio Brown every week and know that he was going to be a stud. And we've had a few tastes of that, but it keeps going away. And so it's rather unfortunate. Now, Adam said earlier that he thought that Todd Gurley was going to be the highest owned player on the slate. I think it's going to be D'Angelo Williams. People are going to talk up the matchup. It's a good matchup, and I think they're going to be feeding him the ball. Probably going to try and keep Landry Jones from having too much responsibility this game. So I do like D'Angelo Williams a lot. He's still way underpriced for his role and in the offense that he's in, even with Landry or Jones at quarterback. So he's the play that I'm looking at the most. I'm going to stay away from Antonio Brown. He just hasn't gotten it done. His price, when Ben isn't there, the price is elevated. And the Cleveland side, there's just no one that I like over there.
Wow, what about Gary Gronkage, bro?
Oh, man, I just write him off every week. And
what are you thinking?
That's where I was going next, Geoff. From the receivers and tight end position on Cleveland, I'm sure dependent on who's playing quarterback, McCown or Manziel. Anybody worth at least a cursory look here to maybe plug in some value where you need some relief?
Yeah, I mean, if Josh McCown starts, I like the Cleveland pass game. He's performed so much better than people realize. Over 200 yards. I think he had 2 TDs versus Denver. He ate up some really weak pass defenses before that. Pittsburgh's nothing great in the secondary. I definitely like the spot for Barnidge this week. I think Adam's right. I think at 4,700, he's leading Cleveland in red zone targets. I'm definitely interested in him. Now, I mean, obviously with Jordan Reed at 4,600, he's probably more of a GPP play or like a tournament play, but he's still in play. I think this is a great matchup. I also kind of like Travis Benjamin to get back on track here. Pittsburgh hasn't exactly been defending top wide receivers very well. We saw Michael Crabtree go off last week. We saw AJ Green go off the week before. I would actually maybe even consider a Cleveland stack in this game. I know the point total isn't that big, but I do think they'll be behind at some point still. And I think just the way and the amount they've been passing is pretty interesting. So maybe even Josh McCown at 5,000 is kind of in play for me. Most of these are obviously tournament plays, but I still think it's kind of an interesting spot for Cleveland.
Let's move on to Jacksonville and Baltimore here. And Adam, starting with you, do you trust the sort of slow evolution of Blake Bortles and Allen Robinson to be a viable option this week, especially if Allen Hurns doesn't go?
Yeah, I actually think that the Jacksonville offense is kind of chalky this week, and maybe that's me living in like the fantasy nerd bubble where I think everybody's talking about Bortles and Robinson, but I don't know, maybe not. I don't know. I think people realize that the Ravens secondary is just completely inept and their run defense is actually reasonably good. So like when we get situations like that, we know where the ball is going to go. It's going to go to the pass game. And for Blake Bortles to be 5,600 when he's already averaging 21 DK points per game, and now he gets this dream matchup, it's hard for me not to really like Blake Bortles. I certainly think he's in play for cash, and I think Allen Robinson is going to be one of the more popular plays down at 6,700, proving he's matchup proof by doing some work against the Jets and Darrelle Revis last week. So yeah, there's like a Jacksonville stigma out there, like people don't want to roster guys on the Jags, and I think that'll keep their ownership down, but you can't ask for a much better spot.
Yeah, it sure seems there's some existing bias against the Jaguars that will probably linger until they win some more games, but that is a benefit to us where the roster construction and ownership percentages will stay down. Andrew, I have found Justin Forsett to be one of the most infuriating running backs in the NFL this season. Is he ever going to be in play again? Is this Baltimore offense worth looking at in this situation, or is it just strictly a Jacksonville play in this contest?
Yeah, the Baltimore team total is a little bit higher than I would have anticipated. It's almost up to 27. That's pretty healthy, and those are the spots we like to target. The Jacksonville run D is better than people give it credit for, but they're still giving up quite a bit of fantasy points. The problem with Forsett is that I think his price seems fair at 6K, and I think there are definitely some other running backs that are underpriced. So it might be more of a price issue with him as far as fitting him into rosters, but he's probably going to be under-owned, and I think he'd be a pretty nice GPP play. And as far as like Bortles and Robinson and their ownership, I think, Adam, you're maybe living a little bit in a fantasy bubble. I don't think they'll be super heavily owned, but I could be wrong. I do like them both. I was going to say that I think they're great as a great tournament stack, Robinson and Bortles, just because I just can't see the ownership getting out of hand, especially with like Mike Evans and Cobb down at the same price as Robinson. I think he's going to generally get price blocked there. So that'll be one of my favorite tournament stacks this week.
Geoff, any thoughts from you on this contest? Anybody that you have come across as you're building lineups that you're confident in?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just second the Allen Robinson thing. He's definitely one of my top picks this week. But I kind of like the Baltimore pass game a little bit too. They've been passing like 63% of the time, I think. Andrew just mentioned the high point total. Chris Givens at 3,200, definitely a sneaky tournament pick. No Steve Smith. A little bit of coach talk from Harbaugh this week that Givens is kind of getting in sync with Flacco. So that's kind of interesting. I definitely maybe think about using him as like a tournament value play with some high upside. The guy's good for, usually a couple 70-yard touchdowns in preseason, so he probably could pop one off here. Yeah, I definitely have a little bit of interest there. I think this game's a good one to target for fantasy for sure.
Andrew, let's turn to Minnesota and Oakland. And are you living the Derek Carr experience? Are you involved in what Carr has been doing with Crabtree and the entire world seeing that Michael Crabtree is actually an NFL wide receiver who can play the game?
Yeah, I think it's been a fun ride. Carr's gotten better, and then Crabtree's playing great, and I just think Amari Cooper is an absolute stud. So it's just a good combination of all three of them. Are they going to continue this week? Yeah, I think they probably will. They have a 24 team total, which is on the higher end of what they've been having all year. So that's a good sign. And like I just said, all of them are playing really well. Now, Latavius Murray's a little bit banged up. He's in the concussion protocol. I think he's probably going to play, but if he doesn't, that's probably a couple more looks to the receivers. I like all of them. Crabtree's price has come up. He's at 5'8". So now you're starting to get into that range with some of the more elite receivers, and I don't think he's that. But I think he could be considered. Now, the problem with tournaments is he's probably going to be overowned based on what he's done lately. And Amari Cooper is sitting at 6'8". That, to me, screams great tournament play, because just like what I was talking about with Allen Robinson, he's going to get price blocked. There's at least 3 guys ahead of him that are going to be more popular. I think he's playing really well, and he's got as much upside as anyone at any time.
Geoff, is Stefon Diggs in play even if Shaun Hill is his quarterback, or is that enough of a mitigating factor to stay away from Diggs?
Yeah, that's a good question. It sounds like Teddy Bridgewater is going to play, but if Hill was in there, I don't know. The thing is, the Raiders secondary is really bad, so I think I would probably maybe still have a little bit of exposure, but I wouldn't use him in like a 50-50 lineup. I think Hill is just a little bit too big of a downgrade. But that being said, I really like Stefon Diggs in this spot. We saw what Antonio Brown did last week. Diggs is a similar type of player. And Teddy Bridgewater, if he plays, is a really good quarterback. I don't think people realize, because Minnesota does not pass very much, but he's insanely accurate. He's been getting Diggs the ball. I would be shocked if Diggs didn't get 100 yards in this game with Bridgewater at quarterback. So I really like him this week for sure.
Adam, thoughts on Diggs and also on Adrian Peterson in this contest at 7,100 on DraftKings?
No, this is a Diggs spot for sure. We already talked about St. Louis's pass defense and how much respect we have for them. I think people kind of chased Diggs into that spot and then got burned, but I think that was pretty predictable. Now he goes up against David Amerson and DJ Hayden, who are just complete debacle. So I actually like Diggs even if Shaun Hill starts. I'm kind of a Shaun Hill truther. I think Shaun Hill is actually reasonably decent, at least from a fantasy perspective. So yeah, definitely on Diggs. Peterson, the Raiders definitely play the run way better than they do the pass, and that's kind of why I shied away a bit from D'Angelo Williams last week, which obviously cost me a whole shipload of money. So I don't know. I guess I'm hesitant to write off Adrian Peterson, but I've been going D'Angelo and I've been going Gurley over Peterson at the top end of the running backs.
All I hope is that at my day job, I get a reasonably decent rating year-end review time. That should be up for a big bonus if that comes through. We can move on to probably the game that many people will struggle with and try to tackle here, the Giants and New England. New England going up against a bad Giants secondary. And it seems, again, Adam, that we're going to have to decide on Brady. We're going to have to decide on Gronkowski. And then you have the cheaper option like LaFell at wide receiver for New England. But can you build your cash lineup around Brady with, we talked about it on the Sweat Show, the floor and the ceiling just not being that high for high-priced quarterbacks?
Sure, yeah, and I regular watchers of this fine program know that I almost never pay up at quarterback, and I'm not about to start now, especially when we can get Aaron Rodgers for $1,100 cheaper, especially when we can get Blake Bortles for $3K cheaper. It's obviously a fine spot for Brady. I would have no problem projecting him for a floor of 20 to 25 DraftKings points. I think last week was a bit of an aberration. He only had 18 DraftKings points, but you can see what happens when it becomes a blunt game. And you can see what happens if you roster Gronk and it becomes a LaFell game. It's like we like to target the offenses that are more concentrated. Like the Raiders, for example, we know when they score points, it's going to be Crabtree and Cooper and Carr. It's unlikely to be Clive Walford or Seth Roberts or whoever else. In New England, Rob Gronkowski's had 5 targets in 3 out of his last 5 games. I can't fathom paying $8K for a guy who only has 5 targets in 3 of his last 5 games. And that goes for cash games. Obviously, I think Gronk is a pretty good tournament play because there's a lot of people thinking now that Gronk is too expensive, and against the Giants team that just has some of the worst linebackers and safeties in the league, and they get abused by tight ends weekly, I think Gronk is a fine tournament play. But yeah, I mean, I haven't even gotten to the running game yet. I've already been talking for 5 minutes about the Patriots. I haven't even gotten to the running game yet. So that just shows you how many different ways they can go.
And Geoff, that's the question here. We have Dion Lewis going to the IR, obviously, with the knee issue. Then you had what Blunt did last week, but you hear all the talk about Bolden, about James White, who's going to fill in. And we can never really trust what Bill Belichick tells us. So we are at the mercy of just not rostering somebody from the backfield, or do you have somebody that you'd prefer over the others?
I mean, you could definitely take a chance with LeGarrette Blunt here, and like Adam said, hope it's a Blunt game. Hope he gets some short touchdowns. Hope he gets rolling early. And then, but as far as James White goes, as far as Brandon Bolden goes, no, don't roster those people. Who knows who's going to get the touches? Who knows if they'll even get touches? We don't. I mean, Brandon Bolden could get 100 yards. He get 8 passes. I wouldn't be shocked, but he could also get no playing time, and I wouldn't be shocked either. So no, don't chase those guys this week. Maybe someone pops up this week, and you can think about them in a week, going forward. But as far as the Patriot running backs go, I'm not too thrilled on it. I do like the spot for Gronk a lot, but it's like was just said. It's hard to exactly know where everything's going to go for the Patriots. So I'll probably have a lot of Gronkowski this week. I'll probably have no running backs from New England because I don't know where it's going to go. But other than that, this game is it's going to be a little bit hard to target. I think on the New York side, Shane Vereen's a little bit interesting at 4,300 as a tournament play. But again, it's hard to know where the ball is going to go in this one.
I fear this is a Scott Chandler game. It's just going to be 6 catches, 65 yards, and 2 TDs to Scott Chandler. And lots of people are cursing Rob Gronkowski as he has 4 catches for 47 yards and does a dance at the end, but no touchdowns. So Andrew, we mentioned a little bit of the Giants here. You have Odell Beckham Jr. at 8,800. Is that just too big a price tag right now against the Patriots secondary that, though no real big names in that secondary, a couple of Rutgers guys, I'm proud of them, McCourty and Logan Ryan. They're not household names per se, but they're playing well. And you have Odell Beckham Jr.'s price tag at 8,800. Is that just too expensive to roster this week?
Yeah, I think it's too expensive. You know that Belichick's always trying to scheme the best player out, and they know that Odell Beckham is clearly the best player for the Giants. I think he's going to do what he can to make sure that Odell isn't the one beating them, because if they are competitive in this game, it'll be because Odell's going off. So tournament play maybe, but he's just too expensive. And we've talked about this in prior weeks, but some of these elite receivers on DraftKings, like you compare their prices to running backs, and it's just so elevated. So I think it's okay to pay up when they're in really great spots, but this week isn't one of them. And when you can get a guy like Todd Gurley for 7,300 or D'Angelo Williams for 6,500, like I'm going to look to go more balanced with guys in those price ranges. Some of the 6.7, 6.8 receivers we've talked about, like you can get a couple of those guys and they could easily match the production that you're going to see from a Gronkowski or from an Odell Beckham. So that's the approach I like this week.
All right, guys, we're going to close out with 3 games here that may not have the most appetizing daily fantasy implications, but we'll get through them. I promise. We'll do it together here. We'll go to Kansas City at Denver first. And Adam, we have Alex Smith. We have the non-Jamal Charles backfield here. And then we have the Denver defense coming off a rough go against Indianapolis, against the Colts in Indianapolis. What do you make of this contest? Do you see any viable pieces that you can pull together to get either value or top plays that may be under-owned because of looking somewhat like an ugly game?
Yeah, so I don't really play guys against Denver, especially when they're in mile high. So although I think Charkandrick West is seeing, as our friend Drew Dinkmeyer likes to say, Jamal Charles-esque usage, like just massive market share overall in the pass game and in the red zone. But against Denver, I'm not I'm excited about it. So yeah, even guys I love like Kelsey, I'm not really on. And yeah, I don't play guys with quarterbacks who are just among the bottom 5 in the league like Peyton Manning. So I'm not really on any Denver guys either.
Amazing that can be said, but it has been a rough go for Manning. Andrew, anybody for you? Anybody pop up that is worth citing at least? Or is this a game to maybe sit down and watch and enjoy an NFL game without having any DFS implications for it?
Yeah, I actually like Demaryius Thomas an okay amount. He's maybe like a touch too expensive with some of those other receivers we've talked about, but I think he's definitely in the conversation. The targets have been there all year. The biggest problem with him is he's not getting any red zone looks. I think he has 1 target in the red zone all season, which is really pretty mind-blowing. If you had told me that going into the season, even knowing that Peyton Manning was probably going to struggle a little bit compared to what he did early last year, it's still pretty wild. Now, you got to ask, like, is that just fluky, and is it going to regress where he's going to get more, or is that just the way things are? And I think it's probably closer to that's just the way things are. So I'm not expecting a bunch of looks for him in the red zone. They're just not really getting there and not being very effective when they do. But he's getting so many targets. I think he's up there in the top 3 as far as receivers when it comes to targets. So for PPR, he's been pretty effective all year. Kansas City secondary soft. I think it's a pretty good spot for him.
Geoff, how about the Denver defense? Worth rostering against a Kansas City team that doesn't have a ton of pop on offense?
Yeah. Talib out this week, and the KC they're just playing so conservative. So I'm not sure if like the turnovers are going to be there. Alex Smith is still a pretty good game manager. I'd probably just avoid this game. I might even like look at KC's defense as a better play with the way Peyton Manning's playing. I mean, I know it sounds a little bit insane targeting Denver at home, but as a tournament play, I think it might actually work. And the other thing is Emmanuel Sanders out? He's injured, isn't he? So that might give some credence to Demaryius Thomas, what Andrew was just saying. But as far as Denver's D goes, yeah, I mean, I guess they're always in play. They're still a really good team. They still have really good corners, even without Talib. But I don't know. I just feel like this game is best just leave it and move on.
I think Manny's a little banged up, but expected to play.
Yeah, he has an ankle. He sat out Wednesday practice, but they expect him to be back. It's a bad situation where your highest scoring players, just from a real life football perspective, are probably your kickers in this contest. So that probably tells you all you need to know from a fantasy perspective on how this game is going to transpire. We move on to the Sunday night game, Arizona, Seattle. This, Andrew, probably going to be another defensive struggle to a certain extent. We no longer have the love for Russell Wilson we once had. Carson Palmer and the Arizona offense has been good this season, but going into Seattle is rough for anyone out there. Do you see any pieces here worth keeping an eye on, or is this another game to just enjoy from a NFL perspective?
Yeah, and this is just another spot where I like talking about what the team total is this week relative to what they've done in previous weeks, and to see Palmer and the Arizona offense with a 21 team total that's just way lower than they've been. They've been hovering 25 up to 29 depending on the matchup. So that tells you that they're not expected to do what they've been doing. John Brown's still banged up. He was limited in practice yesterday. I don't think that makes a huge difference, but it's just another piece, just another thing to not love about the spot. To me, this is a spot where I'm going to stay off them this week and wait for a better matchup.
Geoff, any flyers from a wide receiver position in this game between Floyd and on the other side, Doug Baldwin and the guys who could give you a touchdown or two if this game were to open up?
If you wanted to get, if you really wanted to target this game in a tournament, I would actually consider Larry Fitzgerald because he's been running a lot of like tight end-ish routes for Arizona, and Seattle has struggled against the tight end actually a lot this year. So it doesn't look like he's going to get like Richard Sherman coverage or anything like that. So Fitzgerald might be the guy who just ends up getting like 10, 11 catches in this game as the only way for the Cardinals to really move the ball. That would be my only flyer play. You could also always consider, I think, Marshawn Lynch and the Seattle D as a correlation. I think Lynch is capable of getting multiple touchdowns versus almost anyone, and especially at home. I think that's definitely probably a good tournament play. So if you were like jonesing to target this game a little bit, I think Lynch, Seattle D, and maybe Fitzgerald.
Let's close it out with the Monday night football game. It is Cincinnati and Houston. I don't know if everybody saw the ESPN, the magazine cover with Andy Dalton, probably one of the creepiest photos you'll ever see on the cover of a magazine. But he has been really solid this year, Adam. He has come into his own, maybe finally understands the offense and has the pieces around him to make him better than he has been. Do you like Dalton and any of his weapons as options for the Monday Night Hammer?
Sure. Yeah, I don't, I think Cincinnati's going to have no problem putting points up on this Houston defense. The question is, where is it going to go? Obviously, I like Eifert, but I think his price has gotten to a point where it's right kind of where it should be, given the volatility, and his red zone conversion rate is like abnormally high right now, and there could be some regression coming there. I think everybody on Cincy's play, the sneakiest play might be Jeremy Hill. Even though he's played so bad this year, this shapes up as a game where they're going to be protecting elite 11-point favorites at home. So, yeah, I have no problem with A.J. Green. I have no problem with Dalton. I have no problem with Hill. I have no problem with Gio. And the guy I projected for the most targets this week, even more than A.J. Green, even more than Mike Evans, is DeAndre Hopkins.
Right, and Andrew, on that side of the ball, on Houston, you have Hoyer and Hopkins have a very good connection. Obviously, you've seen a ton of targets for DeAndre Hopkins. Is 8,700 still a price tag, though, as you've been talking about for wide receivers, too far out from an expected return?
Yeah, I think he's a good tournament play, but it's that same thing I was talking about with Odell. I think this is the week to just go with a more balanced approach. So he's not really fitting in the way I'm constructing my rosters. But, I mean, he can go off at any given time. I think his ownership will be down a little. I don't know. He seems a little bit like the forgotten man for no good reason, and I could be wrong. But I think he might be sub 10%. If that's the case, I like him quite a bit for tournaments.
Geoff, anything here with these middle or even lower tier wide receivers of the likes of Marvin Jones or Cecil Shorts or even Rutgers' own Mohamed Sanu? I'll throw him in there just to mention his name. But with Marvin Jones especially, seems like if there's going to be a high team total, lots of options for Andy Dalton, Jones is going to be involved in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I like Sanu, but not in this game. Like he's a nice player. But I think against the weaker defense, I think it's a good idea to target like the cheaper, more value picks from Cincy. I think that Dalton's going to have a lot of time. He's going to be able to use guys like Marvin Jones. He's going to be able to use Gio Bernard maybe a little bit in the pass game. And I think you'll probably see one of those guys have a big game here rather than just him constantly targeting A.J. Green, which he probably won't have to do because he won't be under pressure. I think that knowing which one of those 2 or 3 players are going to have a big game is the issue. But if I was going to create like a tournament stack, I definitely target Gio. I definitely target Marvin Jones. And I think one of those 2 or 3 guys could have a big game here.
Gentlemen, great stuff today, previewing this weekend. I would like to go around the horn one last time. Andrew, starting with you, who's the guy this week for you? Who's the guy that, from a roster construction standpoint, you are going to at least start and try to build around as you're building your lineups for NFL?
I think McFadden is probably the first guy that's entering in my lineup at the running back position. And then receivers, we didn't really talk about him, but I really like Brandon LaFell. Just because he's a really cheap way to get exposure to that Patriots offense. So there's not a ton of risk if it becomes a blunt game. And the targets have been there for him. So I think he's got a big game or 2 coming down the pipeline. And then Devontae Adams, the other guy at that price point. Like, you probably don't need to play both of them because you just don't need the savings. But those are the 3 guys that I really like as far as cheap plays that I think are pretty safe with some good upside.
Geoff, how about yourself?
I really like Allen Robinson this week. I think if Allen Hurns goes out, I think you could see just a monster game from him, matched up against the worst secondary in the league pretty much right now. I really like that. As far as running back goes, I think it's a little bit more dicey this week, but I do like McFadden too. And I think James Starks is in a good spot for a big game too.
Adam, now that everybody has been discussed already that you're probably going to mention, who are your core players, or at least just one core player that you're building around?
Yeah, definitely Allen Robinson, as Geoff mentioned, but also for tournaments, Gary Gronkage is just the man. He really is.
That'll complete our Week 10 preview right here on DraftKings TV. Andrew Wiggins, Geoff Ulrich, and Adam Levitan. We'll be back next week with more on Week 11. And, of course, tune in Monday night to the Monday Night Sweat Show right here on DraftKings TV.